Social Studies 20, Long-Term Causes of World War I. This is part of Chapter 7, related issue 2. World War I is a really good example of the concept of ultranationalism. So as we're looking at um, Social Studies 20, we're examining the role that nationalism should play in a country's foreign policy. In related issue 1, we established what was just plain old nationalism, chapters 1 through 5, just garden variety nationalism, the French Revolution, citizenship, and so on. What we look at in related issue 2 is the concept of ultra-nationalism. And we've already talked about this. This is when you take love of your nation too far and you impose it, your nation, your ideology, on another nation or other nations. So that is the focus of related issue number 2, and this is where World War I fits in very nicely. It's a good example of ultranationalism leading to that conflict. So we get back to our notes here. First long-term cause of World War I is plain old expansionism. We talked a bit about this yesterday. The focus of the lesson was the nation state and different options a nation state can take to achieve security, safety, and survival. So option 1, of course, was expansionism. And here is expansionism through the lens of World War I. What had happened, and you learn more about this in grade 12, but most of Western Europe had gone through what is known as the Industrial Revolution. It's the embracement of mechanization over human and animal-powered labor. To continue to industrialize, Western European powers needed resources. They needed coal, gold, etc., etc. And the only way to get a lot of those resources was to take them from somebody else. And so industrialization will lead, it'll be one of the causes of the scramble for Africa that I'm going to talk about in a minute or two. Another long-term cause of World War I was just plain old prestige, or what is known as empire building. The bigger your empire in the 1800s, the more prestige that was attached to your empire, your nation state. So the biggest of all the empires, of course, was the British Empire because of their strong navy. And you've probably heard the saying, the sun never sets on the British Empire, meaning that the British Empire was so big, wherever you went, part of British territory was in the sun. So prestige was another example of expansionism being a long-term cause of World War I, and I'll talk about that in a second. As well, I'm going to refer to the Moroccan crisis and the Fashoda incident when I show you a map in a second or two. Moroccan crisis was a showdown between Britain and France over Egypt during the scramble for Africa. The Fashoda incident was a showdown between France and Germany during the scramble for Africa. Here's actually a map, and you've probably seen this before if you think back to grade 10 social studies. That map is demonstrating the scramble for Africa. And as you can see, with the exception of 2 African territories, Ethiopia and Liberia, every other territory in Africa was colonized by a European power. So the point I'm trying to make is that as nations industrialized, they needed resources. They took them from Africa. As they looked for prestige to build their empire, they took territory from Africa. The problem, among other things, was that as more and more territory is claimed by these European powers, available territory in Africa begins to run out. And that's going to heighten tensions among the Western European powers. So getting back to the Fashoda incident, it was a showdown between Britain and France for what is going to become Egypt. They almost go to war in 1899 over what's going to become Egypt. Eventually, the British win the showdown without the conflict, and they lay claim to what becomes eventually Egypt. The other showdown was the Fashoda incident, and it's a showdown between Britain and or France and Germany over Morocco in northern Africa. Britain helps out the French, and war is narrowly averted between France and Germany, and the French win that showdown, and they would lay claim to Morocco. The Germans get their own territories too, but they did lose out in Morocco. And so again, back to the point of the scramble for Africa, we need to understand that as nations pursued industrialization and prestige, that's going to lead to conflict among the Western European powers. It's actually a miracle it took until 1914 for World War I to even happen. It almost happened way sooner than that. Long-term cause number two of World War I is the alliance system. I alluded to this again in yesterday's lesson when I talked about another option available to nation states to achieve security was forging alliances with other nation states. And so once one nation state forges an alliance, their enemy probably will have to forge their own alliance. And this can make a small conflict a big conflict because if one country goes to war from that alliance, it draws in the other countries from that alliance as well. And that's how you're going to get World War I, or one of the reasons for World War I. There are your two main dominant alliances leading into World War I. You've got the Triple Alliance, which comes first in 1882, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. Your other alliance with the Triple Entente, France, Britain, and Russia. The Triple Entente was created because of the Triple Alliance. They needed a way of staring down Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. What they're trying to achieve is what is known as a balance of power. In other words, they're trying to establish a Europe that has, equal footing and power among the dominant nation states. Without the Triple Entente, the Triple Alliance would have thrown off this balance of power and it would have been too dominant. It made the Triple Entente necessary. Third long-term cause was Germany. And I don't mean by this German aggression. What I mean was that Germany was just becoming too strong leading up to World War I. Germany was led by two people, Kaiser Wilhelm II. A Kaiser is a German king or a monarch. Bismarck was the Chancellor of German Parliament, or what is going to become German Parliament at that time. Technically, at this time, before 1870, there is no Germany. And I'll show you on a map in a couple of seconds. Germany is an association of states that will one day unite to become Germany. The biggest of these states was Prussia. And so if there was a leader of these German states, it would have been Prussia. And they're represented by Wilhelm II and Wilhelm I and Otto von Bismarck. France actually recognizes early on that Germany's getting too strong, and they actually go to war with Prussia, that is going to become Germany later, in what is known as the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. The war was motivated by Germany just becoming too strong. The war is actually won by the Prussian and other German states, and at the Treaty of Frankfurt, they declare truce and they stop fighting. But France has to pay reparations to Germany. A reparation is money you have to pay back to someone. And France also loses Alsace and Lorraine, two really important French provinces rich in resources, minerals, and other forms of wealth. This was a big sticking point for the French. They never really got over losing Alsace and Lorraine to Germany. They'll be looking for the first chance they can get to get back those territories from Germany. That'll be one of the causes of World War I. After winning the Franco-Prussian War, Germany actually unifies and becomes an independent state in 1871. They are guided by a couple of principles. Number one is blood and iron, which basically means doing whatever it takes to get what you want. They're looking for great power status. Germany unifies really late. They don't unify till 1871. So France has already been there for a long time. Britain has been there as a nation state for a long time. Germany is late to the table. And so now they're looking for ways to achieve great power status. They want to be like France. They want to be like Britain and so on. And already Germany's looking at how they're going to attack and fight the French. And that is known as the Schlieffen Plan. They're already thinking about going to war with France. They know what's going to happen again sooner or later. Here's a map of Germany before German unification. So you can see that The German states are there, and one day they will unite to become what is known as Germany, but there's not really a Germany yet. Prussia is by far and away the biggest and most influential of these German states, and when Germany does unify, it's going to be under Prussian leadership, Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm I, later on Wilhelm II. Here's what Europe looks like on the eve of World War I, and I want you to take note of what Germany looks like after unification in 1871. So all of those Germanic states have now unified. They have become the nation state, the German Empire. And in terms of landmass, it's not overly big, but they've got a huge population, a lot of wealth, minerals, and resources, making Germany, in the eyes of the French and the British, too strong. And they might have been. There's a map demonstrating what is the Schlieffen Plan. This was actually designed in the 1890s. And so even though World War I doesn't begin till 1914, the Germans have already decided how they're going to invade France. That invasion was a certainty. It's actually a flanking maneuver. It's one of the most famous maneuvers in all of history. If the Germans and the French go to war, and everyone knew they would be one day, you would expect the Germans to invade France across the border that they actually share. So what the Germans did was they designed a flanking end run in which they'll go through neutral Belgium and attack the French from behind. And so if this plan went according to plan, they would seize Paris within weeks and would have surrounded the French army within weeks as well. The French would have been waiting for the Germans along the border. And so the Germans were just going to flank them, come around from behind, take Paris, and very quickly surround and defeat the French army. They actually will use the Schlieffen Plan to invade in 1914. It didn't go as they thought, though. Militarism. Long-term cause number 4. Because they all knew they were going to be going to war sooner or later, and probably sooner, they began to build up their militaries, spending millions of dollars at that time on their military, their army, their navies. They don't have air forces as we think of them yet. Um, and the focal point of militarism, especially between Britain and Germany, would have been the dreadnought. Here's a picture of a dreadnought on the right. A dreadnought at this time was a floating fortress, an armored ironclad warship. But they also build submarines and other naval vessels, and they begin to enlarge their standing armies. When you build a military, you invest millions of dollars into the military. You're taking money from perhaps healthcare, education, and other forms of infrastructure, and you're investing it in your military. They're very expensive ventures. You really only do it if you're expecting to go to war. So, for example, standing armies in Europe will number in the millions of people. They're very expensive. You've got to train these guys, you've got to weaponize them, you've got to pay them to be the standing army. They're very expensive ventures. Dreadnoughts are expensive vessels, they're millions of dollars to build, and they basically embark on a contest of who can have the most dreadnoughts. Here's a couple of graphs, charts to demonstrate just how much they're increasing their military spending. You can see that Germany by far is increasing its spending the most. But so are the other countries too. Russia, Britain, France have also all increased their military spendings. Uh, Britain and France not as much because they already had large militaries. Over on the left, you can see the number of dreadnoughts the countries have built. Britain, being an island, has the most. They pretty much have to. But you can see that Germany's trying to catch up to Britain in terms of dreadnoughts. And then you've got your distant third, fourth, and fifth countries as well. But they're spending millions of dollars in their militaries. They're expecting that they're going to fight. Long-term cause number 5 is just plain old nationalism. We talked about the Balkan states and Balkanization a couple of weeks back, but the Balkan states would have been the focus of European nationalism at that time. Um, in the years leading up to World War I, they would probably be the most measured in terms of nationalism in all of European history. They were literally at each other's throats. The French want Alsace-Lorraine back. Another term I thought I'd give to you as well is the concept of Weltpolitick. It means that Germany desires that great power status that I talked about a couple of slides ago. So you just see profound nationalism at this time. Another map of Europe in 1914, the eve of World War I. Here are the Balkan states that I've been referring to. This area is known as the Balkans. And we talked about this a couple of weeks back. A lot of these Balkan states actually are part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and they want independence. So they're looking for a chance to break away, and World War I to some of those states will serve their needs. Um, Balkanization, the breakup of what is known as the Balkans. Here's a map showing you the territory of Alsace-Lorraine, again after the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, which the Germans won. The French had to give the Germans Alsace-Lorraine, really rich in wealth, minerals, resources, and so on. The French were always trying to get it back. Sorry, just sneezing. Finally, here are the motives behind each of the great European powers leading up to World War I. Britain was looking to end its era of isolationism, and they wanted to establish a European balance of power. They were worried the Germans were getting too strong, and the Germans probably were. The French wanted revenge over Alsace-Lorraine. They wanted to get back at Germany for that. Russia was looking to control the Slavic populations, especially in the Balkan region. So all these Balkan territories, while they may have wanted independence, Russia was looking at controlling them. They saw the Balkans as their people, as their region, as their sphere of influence. So they're looking to get those territories. Finally, Germany wants to out and out challenge Britain for naval supremacy. So you can see the table is set for World War I. It was a very tense and hostile climate without having fired a shot yet. And as I talked about, many historians believe that World War I could have easily begun in the 1890s or as early as 1901, 1902. It's actually a miracle it took until 1914. Here's a reflective task I'd like you to work on. Pick 3 words to describe the climate of Europe by the eve of World War I, 1914. Finally, a cool map that I'd come across. Here's Europe again on the eve of World War I. You can see it is an era of tension, hostility, and strong military buildup. I've always liked that map. Maybe that can inspire you as you choose your 3 words. Thanks for listening. There'll be more to come about World War I.